Hello and welcome everybody to a brand new episode of our Ethical Commerce panel discussion series. We're here today at the beautiful Kulturbrauerei in the heart of Berlin in Germany to speak about social media and e-commerce, a matter of trust. For this, I have invited three wonderful guests that I would like to welcome. First of all, there is Christina Dinar from the Leibniz Institute for Media Research, Hans-Bredow-Institut. She's a designated expert on hate speech and has done extensive research on anti-discrimination projects and more recently, content moderation. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you.
Secondly, please welcome Pernille Tranberg. Pernille is an independent advisor on data democracy, data ethics, and digital self-defense. Pernille teaches data understanding and is the co-founder of the information platform DataEthics.eu in Denmark. Hello and welcome, Pernille.
Thank you very much.
And thirdly, please welcome Caroline Helbing. She's an e-commerce analyst and communication strategist with more than 15 years of experience in e-commerce, and she is focusing on product management and content marketing. Welcome, Caroline.
Thank you.
My name is Nina Müller, and I'm the director of the Ethical Commerce Alliance. So I would like to start with a quote that I read in the New York Times recently. If Instagram and TikTok were brick-and-mortar spaces in your neighborhood, you probably would never even let your teenagers go to them alone. This is quite a drastic statement, but it makes clear the steep decline of trust that we have on social media. Almost weekly, we can read new headlines on privacy violations, lawsuits for data breaches across all the social media platforms all over Europe and in the US. So globally, there is no agreement on what digital trust requires. There's also a lack of clear guidance how to rebuild it. So how can we create a trustworthy environment that allows retailers to offer their products and services when social media fails to deliver? To find answers, we want to look at how these platforms are built and how we move around in them, and how we interact with each other on there. So my first question, Christina, is for you. Can you please tell us a bit about your work? What is content moderation? What is user-generated content? And why is content moderation necessary on social media?
Oh, yes. First of all, user-generated content is actually quite diverse. We have text, we have audios, we have visuals. That is contributed by users themselves. It can be any kind. And the moderation is actually an interesting aspect that I think in the beginning, when the internet established in more forums, when social media wasn't there, it was not a big topic to have moderation. And the bigger it grew, and 2010, we can say social media really went into a section of majority of certain societies, then moderation became slowly important. It took, I think, a lot of companies a lot of time to understand that they have to do content moderation. They have to take some sort of responsibility towards the user content that exists. So that's kind of the overall wrap-up. I think it's very interesting because to take the pictures of this city that if we come from city planning and we think about, okay, how do we build cities and why do we build cities? The central question is always why people are in the city, because there's other people. And social media works very, very similar. You know, why is it social media and why do they come there? Because they want to meet other people or their products or their content that they produce. So that's kind of, and we need to kind of help with moderation and speak about how we want to moderate this kind of content, because not everything falls within the same consent, I would say.
Yes, definitely, and also we are human beings who want to interact socially, not only in the offline world, but also online. Any comments from you, or should I just go on?
No, I think that's the main overall problem with social media is that it's a place where I want to meet other people, and now we put commerce into it, and it's not a commercial platform. It's not by default a commercial platform. So it's a case that suddenly we need content moderation, we need a lot of other regulations because it's built for something else. But that's typical. It happens all the time, right?
Yeah, Caroline, what do you say? The social platform that is built to interact socially, where does commerce fit in here and businesses?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure whether it was really the plan to build a social platform. Was those
Yes, I thought about the same. Yeah.
If there are social platforms, of course, companies and brands will go there because they have to be where people are to engage in the conversation. It makes sense to be there for everyone. The question is just how should they show up? What should they do? What shouldn't they do? And is it a good place for everyone to actually sell? Like checking out a basket, like clicking the buy now button. That's, I think, the question. But in general, every retailer, everyone engaging in commerce or every brand should be present where their audience is. I think it's common sense.
This is the crucial question, is you find your audience where it is, and when they are on the social media platforms, you go there. My question is, and sometimes when I think like the advertising and the marketing becomes too much, do they want to be found? Do I want to be found when I just want to interact socially? And for a tracking example, if I have been looking for a pair of shoes last week and now I'm on Twitter, Instagram, say whatever, and then I'm pestered with advertisement that I don't want to see and that I find creepy that it pops up there at all because I didn't click the reject all cookies button.
Yeah, I know what you mean. This is this targeting from hell experience. Nobody wants to be stalked like this. Like, aren't you a mother with 3 children under 10 years of age? Don't you need to buy winter boots now? Here's an offer. It's this kind of profiling where you show to the user that you know exactly who they are. That is really weird, really creepy, as you say. But what is interesting is that there has been a survey that more than 70% of those who were asked confirm that they feel not well addressed if some content shows up they cannot relate to. So we do expect from how the internet works today, everything works with a certain kind of targeting. Yours and yours and yours and my Google front page will look different. Even if we search for the same term, we'll have different results. So there is no neutral content. It is always pre-selected for us, and we expect this. So if we present to people, to our audience, content that is not relevant for them, they will be unhappy. They will be annoyed, and this is a very bad start for a customer-brand relationship. So we should show something that is relevant to them. For this, we need data, but it should not be like manipulating or boasting that you know everything about the person. This is not a good way to help people find what they want.
Yeah, no. And do you think it should be? Sorry, Pernille.
No, I think as a brand, you really have to be careful not to be creepy, because if it's too creepy, as a customer, some customers at least would leave. I've left Instagram because it was simply too creepy. So that's I think especially some of Meta's social media I would stay away from because it gets creepy, and a brand should be careful not that creepiness is not rubbing off on their brand. So it's a balance, what to choose, right? What to use. Absolutely.
And do you think advertising on social media should be highlighted and should be marked as such more clearly?
Oh yeah, I mean, for example, it depends on what kind of, natural advertising, promoted tweet or promoted stuff is pretty easy to see what is advertising or what is content. But if a brand pays a person, an influencer something, it has to be very clearly marked that this person is paid for saying this and this and this. Of course, many countries have those rules anyway, but sometimes it's very hard to distinguish. Because most of it out there is probably paid for by some brands.
Yes, content that is paid for. Caroline, maybe you can give us a brief overview of the different marketing strategies that are most commonly used from micro-influencers over direct advertising and the latest thing, direct selling, really on social media. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, of course. Well, most important and most commonly known is probably the ads, advertising. We all remember Mark Zuckerberg in court saying, "Senator, we run ads." So everybody knows how Meta is financed. So ads play an important role, and it is still increasing. I looked up some numbers, and at the beginning of the year, there's always an annual report about the status of social and digital in Europe, and it's called We Are Social report, and they highlighted that there was an increase in, I think 20%, more than 20% of spendings in ads in Germany, meaning that more than a quarter of the total marketing spendings goes into ads now on social media. So this is really a big sum, and it's still rising. So this is what is most commonly being done and coming to mind. The next thing that you mentioned is the selling, the actual clicking the button and buying a product. This does not play such a big role because I think on the one hand, because this software is not made to sell a product. E-commerce software functions very differently than a platform, and often it is like some few highlighted items that are made to be spontaneously bought, like cosmetics or some decorations. You would not buy a car, for example, or your new laundry machine or something like this. So it does not apply to everyone. And then the most important things that probably also Christina can tell more about is research, like learning about your audience, learning who they are, what they're interested in, what are trending topics, how they behave on the network, and how you can serve them best. So this is not yet producing anything, but learning about them and adjusting what you've learned. And then the creation of content, which is like the main job, I think, on social media. And I think the reason why brands and e-commerce and retailers should be present is because the conversation about your products is likely happening anyway. But you can be present and moderate it or suggest some content, or you will be absent and others are driving the conversation. And yes, I think this highlights why companies must be present, and they need to have a plan what they are doing and which kind of content to post.
Yeah, the plan, I think, is a crucial point. Christina, do you want to comment on that? And do you want to say, tell us a bit, do you think content moderation is necessary for professional accounts as well, or more supervision? Maybe also from the platforms themselves? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually like what Carolina said, because there is this crisis communication. For example, every year there are certain products that come and that right-wing activists take. Like we have it for Easter and for Christmas, and then there is these pictures that appear of big chocolates that, you know, now Christmas is taking away and it's not the Christmas bunny anymore, it's something else, and they use it actually to spread hate speech or to spread the extremist message. And usually you have these companies, like big chocolate companies, they need a respondent. But sometimes from my experience dealing with hate speech, they don't have a good plan what it actually means, and they respond also, or they take out the product immediately, which maybe is not the right thing to do in a customer relationship, because actually people like their product, or it was just a fake or a catch they fell on, but they didn't really have a crisis plan in these in Twitter. Actually, it's very, I can tell you, on Christmas we will have it again for sure, some sort of tweet that will really go through, that will be probably fake or manipulated. But yeah, brands also need to kind of be aware of this tendency in social media to spread or to use their product for spreading hate or extremist message, or yeah, in this case sometimes it's anti-Muslim messages, because it kind of suggests this now because there's so many Muslims coming to Europe, we're losing our Christmas, which is totally wrong. But this is what they use these products for. So it's not content moderation, it's also viewing how people talk about your product and also when to take over responsibility or ethic responsibility in a way that we stand for our product and we stand for certain value, and it's totally fine. I'm just thinking of that. And with research on social media, actually very interesting, maybe you can see that most of it is marketing driven. The most numbers we have comes from these actors. It doesn't come so much from social media research, like social science. They look more on the effectiveness and the mechanism in content moderation through the perspective of value, but more capitalistic value or turnovers. And I'm more thinking that is totally fine, but we also need the other approaches where, for example, we have to speak about values or hate or what it does to other people that consume it involuntarily.
That's an excellent question. Do you think that content moderation then can also be used to encourage positive behavior?
For sure.
Businesses?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think Pernille wanted to say something, but
I think, of course, businesses need to moderate whatever they can moderate, but we are also seeing some businesses demanding ethics of the social media channels. Like a couple of years ago, Unilever and a lot of other brands stopped advertising at social media because they didn't want to have their content next to extremist content or hate speech. And so they can also push social media to behave in a better way, which I find very important because of course they can manage their own content. They should do that always. But they can't change the channel, they can't change the like button, they can't change the algorithm. They have no access to the algorithm, right? So it's a black box society. So it's very important that we have ethical brands who will push for a more ethical use of social media.
Do you also think that the platforms themselves have some responsibility?
Oh, they have a lot of responsibility. I would also and they listen to the brands because that's where they get the money. So the brands can really change them.
Do they really listen? Caroline, do they really listen to the brands? Do they have so much power that they can, when they withdraw, like Unilever did, that they can change the way Instagram, Facebook, whatever works, or exercise some power to some extent?
Well, maybe to some extent. I will not have too high hopes, depending on how big a platform is. The smaller is your influence, because it's not only you being there, also your competitors. And if you drop out, then your competitor gladly takes the cake. But I think a very good strategy that we should mention here for companies, for brands and social media is, just as Pernille said, you don't make the rules. You, strictly speaking, don't even own the content. I'm not sure whether everybody is aware of this. You post your photos, you post your content, your graphics, but you don't own it anymore. Meta can do with it whatever they like. So
and that is a huge problem. I don't think there is no awareness for that from individuals.
Yeah, they might do it anyway, but it is important that everybody really knows. So an important part of the strategy for any professional is to bond with the client, with the audience on the platform where they are, but then find a way to take them to your own channels, to your own newsletter, website, blog, whatever you have. Because you cannot make the rules. You can try to influence the platform, but you cannot make the rules. They will never accept it. This is the business model. They are the man in the middle, which you cannot circumvent. So when you do some campaign, when you do something, when you post something, make sure that your call to action leads away from the platform. It's difficult enough to get people off the platform because it's so attractive and addictive, but just try to carry the conversation to your other channels.
I agree totally, because the platforms will collect so much data that some of your users might also be annoyed about that. So I would just use the social media platforms as what they are, as marketing platforms, to get them onto your own platform. That's deadly important. That's where you get the data, that's where you rule. So tomorrow is a new platform. we've had Meta for a long time, but they are almost leaving now because TikTok is taking over, right? So, and what comes after TikTok, we don't know. So the strategy has to be that you have a headquarter, your own platform, your own website. Get them over there as much as possible.
But so you think you're going for a decentralized approach when that everything spreads out, but how how can people then socialize? Can still socialize when they're all spread out on the commercial platforms? Will that drive away social communities, Christina?
No, I don't think so much. I wouldn't say. I would say social media is really more for the social, and this approach that you basically get into other platforms to shop or to is very common. And what I just have one more aspect that I think we didn't speak about is these people that do content creation, and sometimes they are also paid for specific ads. But they also want their piece of cake of the platform, so they form these unions now, and I think it's just up and coming that these so-called content creator or influencers, that they say, okay, yeah, we can live off product selling and recommendation and creating our own content, but we also want a piece of the cake of the platform itself, because they also have the same problem. They don't have access to the data, they produce a lot of the content that the platform relies on, and they do a lot more than just selling their products or getting into contracts, and that also needs to be advertised, by the way. It also needs to be marked very clearly. There we have also a problem that between the social and the selling, sometimes it's not clear. But I think that's very interesting that they also say we have our own share in the responsibilities that the platform need to share their gains that they do through the ads also with us. Not only through the commercial trade, but also us that we create the content, because we do user-generated content. And they sometimes moderate it themselves also. They have a big team that takes care of that. So that takes a bit away from the question, but I think it's also an important aspect, because some brands, Caroline, they think about working together with influencers in order to gain more than just through buying ads with a big platform. I don't know so much about this relationship, but I think that's also very interesting because it usually gets more attention or is more effective.
But we're seeing an interesting trend in that influencer marketing sphere, and that is that the ethical companies realize that they should not have minor influencers. Because, for example, the Danish global company Lego, once I saw that they were actually having an influencer, he was 9 years old. And I mean, you have to be 13 on YouTube. So, and Unilever just changed or just did a change in their policy where they say they won't have any influencers below 16.
Okay.
So we're seeing a change there, and it's all about being conscious about it. Most people didn't think about that before. Oh yeah, you have to be 13 or 16 to be on a social media platform.
Minors is a very different topic, but a very important one to talk about, like what level of security and of safety do we need for minors? Should they be allowed? Like from my introductory quotation, should they be allowed on the social media platforms, whichever ones, and then which would be the appropriate age? In Europe, they have very different age entry levels. In the UK, it's 13. In Germany, I think it's 15 or 16. But generally, should there be a common one in Europe, or should they be changed? And even then, we all know how easy it is to cheat when setting up an account. Just set the appropriate age or pick a different date of birth, and then there you go. And like with Instagram, who allowed 13-year-olds, no, they were fined for that, more than 400 million euro fine in Ireland for allowing under 13s to set up professional accounts, giving away their email addresses and home addresses that were publicly available. How can this happen? But how can we have better and higher protective standards for children? Also, when it comes to advertising, Carolina, when we talked about this panel discussion before, you mentioned that online shopping has a default protection because children cannot buy online with no access to a credit card, which they cannot get before they are 18 or older. But when they can, well, theoretically, when they can get access from someone who is parents or friends or whoever, they could buy whatever they want. But in the social media world, what do businesses do about this, or addressing advertising towards children or micro-influencers under 18 or different marketing tools? Can you say something about that?
Yes, just as you said, I think the e-commerce, the act of buying something is in a way special and different from the general social media appearance, because at some point you have to accept terms and conditions, you have to have a credit card, a PayPal account, whatever, to pay for the product. So it is not such a big topic, minors, in e-commerce for buying, for the sales. But of course, it is understandable that companies address juniors and minors because they have such a big influence on the purchase decision. So if we talk about buying or the cycle that a person goes through before a purchase is made, it has several steps. I would like to quote them very quickly so everybody's on the same page. So people don't buy immediately. They start from the first phase, which is called the awareness phase, when you just realize you have a need or you get to know a brand. Then you come to the second stage, which is the decision, or you're pondering whether to buy one or another. This is usually the moment when you get into details, you need more information, and social media is not very good on that. You might see some influencer, they might present the product, that's true, but if you really want to go into the details, which car to buy or which sofa, or well, I'm taking those extreme examples just to show it makes no sense to do this on social media. You will go probably also somewhere else. Then is the moment where you press the button, you buy, but then there's also after sales, a very intense phase of communication with the client who is nervously waiting for the product to arrive or wants to exchange, wants to refund. And then there's the loyalty phase, the moment where you try to win back the customer for a next cycle. So we have 5 stages in total, and minors are of course hugely influential on their parents and grandparents what to buy. So I think it makes sense that companies address their needs and their interests, but it should be done appropriately. And as a guideline, I would say it is hard to make social media safe for young children alone, like to just give them the device and let them run off. I think will not work. We will have to supervise them. Like when you were asking about, would you let your child go to this brick and mortar shop alone? Probably not, but they still would want to go, so I will have to join them and go with them. And then it is easier to navigate, and it is our responsibility as parents to make sure they are safe. So,
but I think this is very complicated because many, even adults, are not aware, and there's no sufficient information and around and safe information how to protect your online privacy. But this is a good question for Pernille, because you educate people on that topic, and adults especially, but also children sometimes. Can you tell us more about those courses and the questions that you get?
Yeah, but first of all, just to finalize this,
yes, absolutely.
There's a reason why you have to be minimum 13 on social media, and that is because if you use data to profile and to put messages towards you, it's too manipulative for children, and that's why we should protect them. And they are being manipulated. Grown-ups are being manipulated as well, but especially children. So I do think that the platforms have a huge responsibility. They just say, well, you have to be 13 or 16 to be here, and then they can lie about it. They should have some kind of a parental consent or age verification process, which, for example, Lego has. They have a parental consent process.
Do you know how this works in detail? Like also
They make sure that the parents have said yes, so their kids can go online, and there are more than 50 million kids on their social media platform. So you can easily do that, but nobody has demanded that of YouTube or Instagram in the US. Nobody has demanded that. The UK has just made an age-appropriate design legislation. So we'll see that in the future, that there will be some age-appropriate legislation in some way or another. But when it comes to kids, I think they are learning it in the hard way now, because they are being exposed to so many different things that they are actually better than grown-ups to distinguish sometimes between fake and non-fake. Of course, it depends on what it is. But what I hear most from children or young people is, how can I delete stuff? That's what I hear. And that's what we have in Europe, which I love. We have the right to be forgotten. So we have a right to be deleted. And that's a very interesting trend as well, that we see all these messages being deleted automatically. A lot of young people like that. And that's a big difference from the older generation, who will archive a lot of stuff and save our pictures and everything, and they just want to have it deleted so they can get on in life, and nobody can get back at you and say, and abuse the content against you later. So the deletion is a big topic. But of course, I'm also teaching stuff like how you should behave as a public person online, because the difference between being private and public is huge. And a lot of platforms say you can be private when you use Messenger. You can't be private if you use anything from Meta, for example. So it's very important to discuss with them what is private. You define what is your privacy. What do you want to keep private? Here are some of the issues you should think about. You should maybe keep away from those platforms. And here's how you can behave as a public person, because the data can always be found again, unless you make sure it's deleted. So these are some of the topics.
Can I add to that?
Of course.
Because what I think is very interesting about this young and old people, we still have a growth on social media, and that's old groups, so-called silver surfers. And the specific migrant groups, like they are actually the ones that access Facebook now, that they can still say they don't lose, but they still gain specific groups. And I think they are really exploited in the way that they are not very conscious of these mechanisms. They are old, yes, and they're adults, but they are not conscious of these manipulative mechanisms at all. And that's usually, here we have the whole, that's not about products and brand, but more about disinformation, fake news, extremist message who are not so clear, that they kind of access to, and they don't realize the manipulation, because they're not these, they didn't grow up in this digital education, or they didn't learn it the hard way, as you describe. If you are young and you grow into it, you will make some mistakes, but you're also protected if you are young. You can return products, you can say, contract is not valid, all these kind of mechanism exists, but with old people, it's actually, it's a total section that's not so well looked into, but that is a problem of society in a way. Not so much of brands, because they can order, they have the money or they don't, but more about the manipulative technical things behind social media.
So do you think with the demand to be able to delete, the right to be forgotten, do you think that comes out of the need to protect their own privacy, even though they might not be able to voice it or to put it in that way? Or do you think, and does that mean they have a higher demand and a higher awareness to protect their privacy than adults or than non-digital natives? Or do you think adults have a higher...
I definitely think that children and teenagers have a higher... They really want to protect their data because they have everything in front of them, right? They need to find a job, they need to get an insurance to buy a house and get a loan in the bank, and all this stuff can be stopped if you go into their digital footprints. So they are the most important group where we are on the safe side in many ways. So they realize that. Sometimes I'll get teenager tell me, you know, my God, I've been out in this discussion, you know, and I'm really angry and I won't get a job because it comes out very high up in my search results and everybody thinks I'm crazy because I'm very angry in that discussion. How do I delete that? So that is a big topic, definitely. And another big topic in that relation is, I think we'll see much more in the future, is that you can actually take your data from Facebook, from TikTok, and you can delete it. And then you can keep your data in your own pot in the future and use it for different stuff. That's another interesting issue as well.
Yeah, another very interesting topic. Well, we can talk about it another time.
Yes.
Definitely, we can talk about it forever. But let me go back to the user-generated content. Caroline, hate speech and abuse of certain products or to manipulate those. How can businesses deal with that other than driving customers or potential customers away from the social media platform to their own platforms? But what do you think, like in a Twitter conversation, in a thread, and there are a lot of people who attack others or who act in a certain way that, I don't know, make fascist remarks or whatever. What can business social media accounts or account content creators do? How do you protect your brand?
Well, there's a specific role that I would distinguish from the content creators or content writers, content marketers. Those are creating the content they want to put out, and then there has to be someone like a community manager, community guide, who is not so much producing by themselves, does not follow a certain editorial plan, for example, but is just present to moderate and to react, or if necessary, to delete. I think those extreme cases that you were mentioning, there's common sense among the audience and the people for whom you are writing or to whom you are addressing as a brand, that a certain conversation should simply not be happening. Those examples that Christina was giving at the outset, it's clear that this is wrong. Nobody wants to see this. So I think these are not so critical. They are very inconvenient. They have to be handled with care. You have to be really fast. So it is a challenge. But I think the difficult part is the day-to-day business and like small conversations which are a bit off, or maybe they were intended in a different way, but you read them the wrong way, and then suddenly something, some bomb goes off that you never expected. Well, what helps, I think I will give an example soon, but I just want to finish the thought that what really helps is to think about that there's another person, another human being sitting at the other end. Yeah. Because we call them social networks, but there's nothing of the social skills that we usually naturally have as humans, like reading a face, understanding the tone of voice, seeing body posture. We don't have this, and it's very easy to misinterpret.
Or willingly misinterpret also, I think.
Yeah.
Some people are just there to disseminate hate. Or their own miserable, born in miserable mood.
Yes, but I think this is not so harmful for a brand among them, the main audience. What is difficult for you is a criticism that is unjust. But it was not. It was the fault of the person who used it, misused it, or else that you as a company behave inappropriately at that moment. For example, there was a true case. A gentleman on Twitter was was writing to a restaurant chain saying, hey, pizza restaurant, your app is crashing all the time. It's the 5th time my order is gone. Don't you care? Is nobody looking into this? And they were replying, more or less friendly. And at the first look, it does not look so dangerous. They just said, hey, thank you for your message. Will you kindly forward this to this email or to this page so our developers can look into this? And what they did not know or did not research, they should have done, is that this gentleman was not a no-name. He was running an IT blog. He was very savvy on this area. And of course, he was reacting the way that everybody of us immediately reacts, like, well, no, I'm hungry. I'm not forwarding your bug fix to developers. I'm ordering with your competitor now. And this is something that just does not look good. It doesn't look very dangerous or difficult. It's not, it's very relatable, and every person understands that this reaction from customer service or from community management was not empathic at all. It was not understanding that this person is frustrated because software does not work and is hungry. Of course, the person wants to eat. If you order fresh food, you're hungry. You don't want to hear like, please order, send this bug fix.
Nice combination of things.
And a great example of how you should not do it.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is the small things that you should be aware of and that needs a lot of practice. Comes from practice.
But I think seeing the realizing that the people on social media are actually human beings doesn't need so much practice. I think it's just actually common sense. I don't know why it is so easily forgotten, because we're all sitting behind computers, and then we're all demanding more privacy and higher privacy standards, and we're looking into ways of how to protect ourselves better. But then, Christina, don't the people who spread hate speech are better protected then as well?
Yeah, in a way, yes. But the thing is, if we make laws, or I'm really thinking of panelists that you can take your data and store it for yourself. I really like this idea, very much appreciate it. So they could also do it too. But the thing is, we are a democratic system. If we make rules, they apply to everyone, also those ones who spread hate speech. That doesn't mean that they couldn't be held responsible for their behavior or the content that they spread. I think that's more, the rules are for everyone the same. But the thing is also to take care in the little sense. If you look on extremist message, not on products, it's also to see that something's coming and to anticipate and to also confront them with some sort of responsibility on these online behaviors. I mean, where are we in the world that, Trump took so many years and he really spread a lot of hate speech that we could say that way. And he was still there all this time. And it took a long time to say, now is enough. Actually, 2 weeks before he left the office. So I really like this idea of Caroline to be more anticipated, to see it more front. This is something I think where commerce and dealing with hate speech can learn from each other, to be very conscious and empathic and aware, and also to make these people accountable or help the platform.
And also acknowledge that we will never make these platforms sober. It's never going to happen.
No.
They're never going to be a democratic player. It's a commercial platform, and there'll be more shit out there than there'll be good stuff. And that's the hard part of it, that we are now dependent on those social media platforms. I hope we'll see a new social media platforms where it's much more neutral, where we can control our own domains, where it's based on open source, it's not based on, intransparent algorithms, I wish we had one in Europe, which was open source, where we could go and do shopping, where we would not be manipulated with. I hope we can do that one day. I think it will be a possibility. And if we talk about digital sovereignty in Europe, we should have a platform, so we're not dependent on neither the US platforms or the Chinese platforms. And they're so intransparent that we're talking about helping them become more trustworthy. We'll never manage that.
No, I don't think this is not what they are playing at.
No.
This is not how those platforms are built and designed. But maybe when we can find ways to protect ourselves better, everybody can set their own and demand higher protection. And if everybody rejects this, I think together we can make a difference. When everybody rejects cookies, and then when everybody is taking the necessary steps to move around in social media in a way that is protective and is not and assumes some sort of responsibility for whatever they say. I think then this might lead those platforms to rethink and adjust over time, because they're forced to adjust, because this is what the people, the users, and how they make money in the end demand. Yeah. Caroline, any comments?
Well, it's maybe just a side topic. I just wanted to mention that the whole GDPR is a big challenge for retailers and for e-commerce too, because what we were just discussing that we expect from social media is what is expected from online shops as well, that you store this data securely, that you have it at hand, that as soon as a client comes and says, please delete everything, but of course not stuff that you still have to show to Finanzamt, right? It's really difficult and challenging. It was just a legal change, and retailers were challenged and were struggling to find a solution for them, for themselves, and we see that it is possible. And well, just to mention, as a user on social media, you are looking for this kind of security of your data. Well, there are people who are working on this, who have to prove that they are complying to it, and maybe also a reason to feel more safe in those own channels by a brand or by a retailer.
I think it's an excellent point, but I don't think that the way GDPR is enforced now is an excellent way to be transparent, and it's a tool that businesses are often are forced to show how the cookies are used, but it doesn't help the user, it doesn't help the individual, the shopper, to know where the data is actually going, because it's so vague and no one has time to read it. But I think this is at the same time, an actual opportunity for brands, for businesses to do better once they have drawn people away from social media to their own shops, online shops, to be transparent, to show contextual way how the data is used, how the personal data is used, and to reflect really which personal data they really use. Because a lot of the trackers, and that's a different story and I won't go into detail there, that are being used, and a lot of data that is collected is not necessary at all, and the analytics tools being in use are very often designed in a way that brands are not even aware of, that the analytics tool is also collecting that data, the customer data, and that the brands are paying with the customer's data. And that is not really trustworthy, I think. Pernille?
Well, we talk a lot about social media, but there are actually social media platforms which we have not talked about, like Discord, or where you'll get the kids today. Where are they? They are out at the games. So, and they should also be 13 out there. But the whole gaming industry and the Discord is an area, a huge area, I think, for e-commerce in the future. And not even in the future, but today, which we have not talked about, which is very hard to understand. I mean, I have a 16-year-old nephew he has a PayPal account and he's dealing with skins. And they can make a lot of money, and most of it is illegal if they do it in the games, so Counter-Strike games. But then they do it outside, and they have ways of which I can't understand what is going on. So there is a lot of regulation here.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, because I thought I can mention you a similar experience. I also have a friend's child who, he's on Instagram. 15, and he runs a very popular account, and he does make some money through it. But so I thought as a pedagogic about it that there is an entrepreneurship in young people, which should be totally fine. And it's nice, actually, you can develop it and you can be so self-confident. But then we should find some sort of responsibility or some kind of approach how to kind of help them, support them, and make sure, because they're in the section by law that they are not kids, they are young adults. So they have certain rights, and I think that's totally fine. I feel it's important for kids or for young adults to grow up also conscious and be empowered and enabled. But that maybe we have, for example, here the Landesmedienanstalt, which is like a body that deals with media regulation. We should have someone there that helps and support and informs parents, that does workshop with these young, very entrepreneurshipy kids, because it's a good thing. You understand? It's actually creative, and it's what we want. We want kids who are conscious of this, but we need to kind of still make sure that they are not manipulated, abused, that they are helped by, in a way, help in an empowering way, not in this
manipulative way. But also, what is also happening with social media and e-commerce is that we are commercializing youth at a very early age. And what does that mean, you know? Usually we've had our TV channels in control, but now it's totally out of control. I don't know if it's going to change our children when they grow up. I think it will change a lot.
I don't know. I wouldn't go for, I think entrepreneurship, since we are humans, has always existed. So even in, like, we are now in the former East Berlin, the socialism really suppressed entrepreneurship. And if you look at society research, there was always, even when there was no market, there was black market, you know, and there was people producing and doing stuff. So I think that's human spirit in there. And it's fine, but we should make sure all the others who don't go in that logic also get the opportunities. I kind of more think it that way, that we should make sure there's alternative, that this is not the only way to raise and think in this logic, but we need adults, young adults with good ideas for the future. Maybe they build the social media that you asked that will come after TikTok that has the data on. That's what I think.
What about the French Be Real? That's a European social media. I don't know how commercialized that is, but I agree. I think we'll see that.
Do you know, Caroline, if they Be Real, if they try any kind of commercial?
I cannot tell, but for sure, if there's a market, France will try to get into it.
What you two just said was very interesting, because I think young people, teenagers, perceive social media very differently. The right to be forgotten, that they just want to delete it. They go on there, they are fearless, and not because they are unaware of the privacy, very aware because they want it to be deleted, but at the same time they approach it very differently. Where I think adults often approach it like, oh, there's a high risk, and there is a high risk, and we have to be aware of those risks, but we also can approach them more fearless, and then we can learn a lot from kids and teenagers and how they move and interact on social media. Seriously, I think, I think there's a lot of potential, and also like just doing things, and of course, but with a certain layer, somewhere halfway, meeting in the middle, is a good approach, I think. Okay, so we have 5 more minutes left, maybe some final questions, comments, or remarks from everybody, and then we can take questions from the audience.
Well, I would continue maybe with a quick idea on what you just said.
Please, yes.
For social media, as in many other areas of life, I think avoidance is not a good strategy, also not for social media. If we are afraid of something and our only way is to keep away from it, we are not mastering it. We are not able to really deal with it. So even if somebody has big concerns or a company is afraid something might go wrong, I think it is not a good strategy to simply stay away from it. You should have some goals, and you should have a plan of what you want to achieve. How much do you want to invest? What are your most important values that you want to show? And with defined steps, like gain control of the area where you would like to leave your footprint. But mastery also for our children, what you were just so beautifully explaining, mastery for our children will not come from keeping them away from everything. They will have to experiment, they will have to try out. And this holds for all of us.
Comments, Christina? No?
Well, I agree, but I think you should try and keep the kids away from social media as long as possible. If you have a 13-year-old legal age, they will probably start 7 or 8 years. If you have 16, they might start 12 or 13. And as a parent, you like to keep them away as long as possible before.
Yeah, but you can't. When the peers, when the friends are starting to do this, they want to be on there as well. And of course, there's peer pressure that you cannot avoid as parents. But I think a bad strategy is just, cross your eyes and hope nothing will happen.
Of course, participate. But if you can, as a group in your classroom, keep them away, you should try. I mean, ask any tech CEO in Silicon Valley, and they'll really restrict their children. Because they will learn. I'm not afraid they won't learn. But I agree that, of course, as soon as they're out there, also as young adults, you should participate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think as parents, you should participate in order to know what's going on and to be a good guidance and a good way to show your children how you can do this.
And then, of course, as a brand, you should not embrace all social media, but you should embrace what makes sense to you. Is it LinkedIn? Is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? Instagram? Is it 2 or 3 of them? You don't have to be out on everywhere.
No,
it depends
it doesn't make sense. Also, does it, Caroline?
Exactly. And I just wanted to add. Of course, children want to start earlier. But just the legal notice that under 16 years old should not use WhatsApp, it has to be respected, right? It's an excellent start to have a conversation with your child and say, sorry, you're not yet 16, you will not be allowed to use it. And this is the value that we show to our children in other areas of life as well, right? Rules are for everyone and not just when somebody's looking. And it makes good sense that children understand this. And we teach them in other areas of life and digital area. Well, they might not follow us.
I
but
just want to say it's also with alcohol the same, and it doesn't
And if
really
brands
work.
would do the same, if we would just agree on what has been agreed upon, I think that's an excellent example. Bad example is like there's a rule but nobody's following. Well, what will children learn from that?
Yeah, I think you have to go with the flow and adjust to that. Of course, children, but they have to make their own experience to some extent too. You cannot protect them from everyone, and you shouldn't, I think. But that's a whole different story. So we're out. My colleague Elizabeth will now read some questions, or the questions from the audience here to start with. Or are there any questions in the stream?
Hi. Yes, we've got a question from our viewers online. Thanks to everyone for joining there. And in case something comes to mind, just please pop it into the comments and we'll get back to it even after the event's over. So we've got one that says, the panel has a great point about how GDPR is impacting online retailers. However, how do we know if ingesting the amount of data they are collecting has any impact on their sales at all? Processing data is costly, and extracting value from it is not easy. So, anyone has any reflections on this? The cost, pros and cons of this data and how it relates to GDPR?
I can take it if you...
Well, yes, it's true. It is expensive, and to some extent, it is always an experiment. We do not know exactly whether the let's say, the hypothesis we have upon the user behavior will really be turning out that way. We don't know, but I think it's simply the only way to go. Right? We have data, and we should try to work on it. But there are a lot of lost paths. If you look behind the scenes in companies, then very often people think they are on the track, and then turns out half a year later they were not. So there are a lot of disciplines about how to measure KPIs and which are the right ones, and often we track the one that is easy trackable, but it's not what is really informative for our business.
Yes.
So yes, it is. I can agree, it's expensive.
It is expensive, but I also think, it is a lot more expensive when you get a data breach which is followed by a lawsuit that does not only damage to your budget but also to your reputation, which is a long-term cost that you might never be able to repair. So I think it's money worth spent.
But there's also a new trend is that, 10 years ago we would say collect and use data. Mm-hmm. But the newest trend is that you should minimize data, and maybe you should. Well, I'll give one example. So, like the BBC is testing a way to get new insights without sitting on a lot of data. So they have their own data, people log into that and they have that data, but they would like to get your Netflix behavior and maybe your Spotify behavior, and then they can ask you to port your data into a personal data pod where BBC don't have access to the data, but they get the insights of your Netflix data and the insights of your Spotify data, and they can personalize towards you without sitting on the data. And I think that's a very important trend, which we should embrace instead of sitting on all these data and just doing what all the big brands are, or big social media brands are doing. I think that's important. It's not about having as much data as possible, but it's having insights.
Yeah.
Yes, valuable insights, very important, but you don't always need personal data for that. But I also hear that you say that we should collaborate more.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
on an
definitely.
industry level?
Yes.
Yeah. Any more questions?
I think, Peter, if you'd like to raise any of yours, and then we can pass to anyone here in the audience too.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you all for this nice conversation. One of the things you talked about was the use, if you can say it like that, the use of influencers to promote products, especially influencers that are minors. But my question is the use of influencers in itself unethical? Or can it be done in an ethical way?
I think it's totally fine, as long as it's marked, transparent.
I'm wondering, how effective is that? Maybe Caroline, you can comment on that. Is that a very effective tool? Because clearly those influencers are paid to promote a certain product, and people know this. So is the trust in the people who promote the product higher than in the product itself, or how does it work?
Yeah, well, obviously you have to choose wisely who is going to represent you. Call them rather maybe ambassadors. I think this makes it more clear why you should not go for the one with the biggest reach, but for the one who represents you well, because it's like a spokesperson for your company. Not everybody is doing this, but I think awareness is raising. And of course, people are doing this because a brand has no face, but you need a face if you want to have people identify with it and build trust. I think a recent trend is that users are a bit tired of over-polished posts and very, very happy scenery, very optimistic, because life is not like this, and many initiatives have been on the social networks to show more reality. And I think there might be a trend, let's see how big it might become, but there might be a trend of just regular people, just users, actual users, who are sharing about their life. Because this is what most people in social media are really interested in. How do other people really lead their life? How does it look like in a family with dirty boots at the entrance? What are they really using to clean this mud off? I mean, might be interesting. And so if we get down to this more relational level, I think it will become more healthy again. But it is a question of values, for sure. It has long been treated as some kind, like the next big thing in marketing. It's not. It really is. Ambassadors, you would have your PR company choose, for example, and you should do the same with influencers.
If there's no questions in our audience here in person, here we please.
Hi, thank you for such an insightful discussion. So I have two, I would say, points or questions. So one kind of leading to where he was going, of course, is that we never really had a problem with having kids in the advertisements before. So, I mean, things which are meant to be used by the kids are supposed to be advertised by the kids. I mean, if you are maybe talking about Legos, so it makes sense for a kid to advertise, and obviously we've had like this forever, and no one really had a problem. But it seems like now we're trying to put a point that it's becoming problematic because of overexposure and different points that we have discussed. So something about that. Second was that about maybe your opinions, if you would like to share how pandemic has kind of given rise to this, because all of these platforms and the classes going online, which was one of the major reasons, like platforms like Discord or WhatsApp to share the homework, and Zoom, I mean, these kind of platforms were given access to the kids. Mm-hmm. So maybe something about that.
Who wants to take that? I can start about the kids. I mean, the difference is now that before grown-ups would use the kids and be in control of the advertisement. Uh-huh. The difference now is that you pay kids directly, and they are in control. They are commercialized. So if we can just, I think it's okay to use influencers if they are not minors, and mm-hmm. if a grown-up is kind of controlling it, of course, then you can do it. That's just the difference, right? Not to commercialize the kids, and they are in control of it.
I'm very much coming from this kids' rights movement, so I think just because we spoke about this fragile moment, the responsibility, if it's business, it's until 18 with the parents, and sometimes you have parents who are very manipulative towards the kids, but we don't know if the kids are really doing something they really want to do. So I am very much for that they are protected. Actually, they have specific rights, and there's actually a big research on these parents who use their kids and publish them on social media, and it's actually their pictures. The parents also own the pictures rights until 18. And there's this children right who say, no, that's not okay, because you haven't really asked the kids, and you create already these digital footprints of them, and there's all these pictures, and really to be resent from it and to give them their free space until they can decide whether they want that or not. That's a pedagogic approach in working with parents and educating them how do you want to grow up kids digitally, and how also to expose them not so much to the commercialism. The other point was more interesting. Sorry, what you? Yeah. That is very interesting, because I teach also a lot, and I see how the world has changed, okay? And we will not go back to what it was before, but now I do hybrid classes, so I do a bit offline, online, and I think that's very interesting, but I see that we are still learning so much about it, and we are not so well prepared for it, so we need to go through a whole practice. If you have a real class and then you have a hybrid class, you need to make sure that you get from the hybrid class to the real class and stuff like that, that we are now in this moment of negotiating that. And I see it in school with kids, and I see it in my teaching with students, that we are not so well tuned in. It will come, and we build, for example, our own platforms that we own, all this discussion we have, that we don't buy a Microsoft package for the next yeah, 1-2 years, but actually 10 because you have these lock-in effects. But we are in a, I think, very interesting phase where we negotiate that, and we can should make sure that our well-being and profit is on the right side, and to make sure it's not only digital, it's not only analog. Really, to live in this hybrid mode is very interesting. But yeah, we are in the beginning. That's all I can say. That I feel from all the practice myself. Yeah, but it'll be interesting to see what it will be in 5 years. I think, and that will be a normal model. At some age, I think primary school, don't really see that, but then later, when you grow up, that you grow into this in this dimension of hybrid working and hybrid collaboration.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I was just gonna be the timekeeper here and say we've got 2 minutes left in our event. And in case that the panelists or Nina would like to give any final remarks. And in case anyone's watching online and you've got questions left, don't worry, please share them with us in the comments and we'll be online to answer those later.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. So, any final comments or remarks from any of you? Other than that, I can just say thank you so much for joining us. I think it was a very inspirational talk and a great discussion. Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody who came and watched this, and thank you everybody who watched online.